Donald Barnby has had an unusual career, serving both in the Army in the Vietnam War and then as an Australian Federal Police officer who was deployed on 3 international peacekeeping missions. He was a country lad, born in Brewarrina in Western New South Wales. He left school early, eager to join the Army.
When I was young, the Vietnam War was in full swing. In 1966, Long Tan had just happened. And I was always interested in the military career, school cadets, and I didn't even wait around to do my leaving. I left early, much to the disappointment of my parents, and waited till I was 17 and literally was at the door of the recruiting office a few days after I was 17.
In 1973, after 6 years in the Army, 4 years of which was in the Special Air Service, SAS, Don followed his father's footsteps into the police force. He was a police officer for 25 years, retiring in July 1998. While a police officer, he served in peacekeeping operations in Cyprus in 1980 and Bougainville, Papua New Guinea in 1998.
Cyprus came up. I always had this hankering to go to the Middle East, and I did. Before Cyprus, we did about a week of orientation, Cyprus, understanding the situation, the environment, the people, the cultures. Our main job was to patrol the buffer zone and liaise with the Greek Cypriot police and the Turkish Cypriot police and investigate any incidents that happened within the buffer zone, and we'd investigate, but we had no powers of arrest. We took detailed notes and gave it to the relevant authorities, either UN or either police force. Police work involves dealing with the public and investigating and not only investigating, but resolving issues and problems between people. And we were involved in dealing with the civilian population of both sides. In Cyprus, the military's role was they had static positions all along the buffer zone, and they patrolled the buffer zone themselves. And our position was a roving commission. We worked from the west of the island all the way to the east. Their role was to make sure that there was no military incidents happening. Our role was to make sure no civilian incidents happened, and if they did, we had to investigate them.
Almost 2 decades later, Don took part in another UN peacekeeping operation, this time on the island of Bougainville in Papua New Guinea, where a brutal civil conflict had just ended. The conflict had been sparked by an Australian-run gold and copper mine, which had catastrophic impacts on the local environment and the food sources relied on by Bougainville Islanders. The Truce Monitoring Group, TMG, started working at the end of 1997 to monitor the peace agreements between Papua New Guinea and the warring parties in Bougainville.
I was a member of the Truce Monitoring Group, and I worked with the New Zealand Army. They were in charge at that stage, 1998. Before Bougainville, we did about a week at DFAT, learning very basic Pissin. It's not Pidgin, it's Pissin language. So we did a cultural training there, and also environment and situational training. We had to have interpreters because, again, unless you know the language, a week or even 6 months training, particularly with native dialects, it's almost impossible. Bougainville was informing the locals of the peace process and disarming some of the rebels if they were willing to do so. My team consisted of a girl from AusAid, a girl from DFAT, a civilian guy from Defence. The 2 women I had were incredibly valuable because Bougainville is a matriarchal society, and the women, they talked and collaborated and discussed things with the women, whereas we couldn't actually do that because they have very cultural, sort of sensitive cultural areas. Bougainville and the New Britain and New Ireland are some of the wettest places on earth, apparently. It rained every day. Our infrastructure was basic, to say the least. The vehicles we had kept breaking down. Our living conditions were really rudimentary. You'd do washing one day and 5 days later, hanging on the line, it was still wet. The humidity was 98% most of the time. And I got quite sick. I lost 12 kilos.
In April 1999, Don came out of retirement to participate as part of the Australian Federal Police contingent assigned to the United Nations effort to organise, conduct and supervise a referendum in East Timor. This was held on the 30th of August 1999 to choose between autonomy for East Timor within Indonesia or independence. A vote for autonomy would have seen East Timor remain part of Indonesia, but with certain powers of self-governance. However, the vote of the people was overwhelmingly to be recognised as a separate and independent country.
I'd just come back from a European trip, and a friend of mine who was the Assistant Commissioner of Personnel rang me up and he said, do you know what's happening in Timor? And I said, oh yeah, I've read a bit. And he said, how would you like to come back into the AFP with your old badge number back and head up the training for we're sending a contingent up there. Our main role was to protect the electoral officers and set up a registration and electoral scenario so that they could hold a popular consultation, and also as a secondary role investigate incidents of atrocities that they came to us with. Police bring a different skill set to the situation. You know, our main role is to deal with people, and we dovetailed into the UN organisation quite well.
Don recalled the difficulty and stress of working as an unarmed peacekeeper in contexts where opposing parties were heavily armed. It wasn't always easy, and it took a toll on his health. He has this advice for anyone thinking of a career like his.
One thing I would say would be, before you joined either the military or the police, get some work experience in anything. It doesn't matter what it is, but get work experience before you join either of those organisations, because you need to be able to deal with people, and it develops maturity when you have to work with other people. The first job you get probably won't be the last job you get. Just consider it as a stepping stone to something better and different, but it's like a coat of many colours, it's layers. So get out there and experience life.